This is the world of unlimited hydroplane racing. It is an incredibly violent and dangerous sport, with speeds in excess of 170 miles per hour. If something goes wrong, it goes wrong like nothing else in any other sport. This is Bill Muncey, the most successful driver in thunderboat racing. Somehow he has managed to survive 23 years of racing, despite this one day in Seattle, Washington.
My boat wasn't about to turn left, it was going straight. I couldn't control it. And from that point on, I don't remember how I survived it.
Hello, I'm James Whitmore, and this is Comeback. Stories of men and women who have met adversity and misfortune, but have had the perseverance and the spirit, the guts, to pull themselves up from near defeat. Today, I'd like to tell you about a remarkable man. He's Bill Muncey. In a world where young is in, and a sport where 35 is considered elderly, 50-year-old Bill Muncey is indisputably the king of unlimited hydroplane racing, winning more races than any other driver in history. His is an unusual story, for he has not come back from one single disaster, but rather a series of them, and somehow he's managed to overcome every one of them. The story of his racing career begins when he was quite young.
I didn't expect to become a professional racing person. It's just that my family, when I was a child, it was a marine-oriented family. They were interested in boats, and the end result was that I had a rowboat and a canoe, and playing with a lot of kids in the neighborhood who, you know, had boats similar to mine. You're always trying to make yours go quicker than the guys there, and the end result was I began to move up through what we call the limited classes in the American Powerboat Association. Outboards to begin with in the late 30s and the early 40s, and then eventually limited inboard boats, which gave me a great deal of background and experience at a very early age, relatively speaking. In 1955, I had the first opportunity, really, in what I was hoping would be a fun, exciting career of joining a professional racing team, and that was the Thriftway racing team in Seattle, Washington. Brand new sponsor, a lot of enthusiasm. I was a rookie driver, certainly, and the crew was excellent. In the first heat, I was able to pull a third, which was a little better than I expected. In the second heat, I was able to win, which is more than anybody expected, really. The point where by the final heat, we had accumulated enough points where we were in contention and might win.
During his first day of Gold Cup racing, Bill Muncey was watching Lou Fazio attempting a record run in the boat's slow motion. What he saw made him realize how dangerous his new career was.
The Lou Fazio incident was a frightening thing for me. The slow motion, and to warn Lou while he was qualifying that it was getting loose and it was beginning to fly. The boat came back on the water, started taking off again. Lou brought it back on the water, and all of a sudden, you could see that the boat was going to kite and virtually fly like a kite. And it did exactly that, and it took off at about 170 miles an hour. Went up into the air about 150 feet, did a complete 360-degree loop, and it just spit Lou out like a seed right at the apex of this 360-degree loop until the boat came down, landed on all fours virtually, and continued on, unattended by a driver. So I really began to have some second thoughts about what I was doing and whether I was maybe as well directed as I might have been. I'd never really seen anything quite like that in all of my career up to that point. And he's up there, and there goes the slipway out of nowhere. Here comes the slipway.
But incredibly, Bill Muncey pushed those doubts aside and went on to win the final heat.
Turn for you, good slipway. A new boat, a new driver, a new man of the Pacific Northwest, as we have Bill Muncey coming over here to be with us. And man, is he a happy lad.
His first Gold Cup race, the oldest and most prestigious event in hydroplane racing. He won 2 out of 3 heats, which was not bad for a rookie.
And we'll have to wait a fix the time.
Bill's next year of racing was to be even better.
from many points of view, the 1956 Gold Cup in Detroit was tremendously successful.
Burn him up boy, Bill Muncey, the 27-year-old kid. He's halfway up that backstretch, and brother, look at him go. He's really moving that boat out. He's going to throw his heart into it. He wants those bonus points, and man, he wants to go for everything. He is 1,000 feet away, 500 feet away, 200, over the line. Bill Muncey, and overhand. And Bill Muncey, is he a happy kid?
Both arms in the air, he's standing up in the boat, and his face is split from ear to ear. And how was the race?
Wonderful.
It's wonderful. That's it.
Oh, yeah. Hey,
Bill
wife.
Muncey.
A very pleased Bill Muncey had just won his first Gold Cup.
You got to stay.
For the jubilant Mr. Flake crew members, 1957 had begun with gold.
The 57 event was an exciting event because we won the race. We won with a Rolls-Royce engine, which was the first time I'd ever had a chance to drive a Rolls-Royce. And we won away.
In October 1957, Bill went to Madison, Indiana.
I was leading Myra Slovak by maybe a couple of lengths or so. I don't know. I was running about 170 miles an hour. And all of a sudden, the only thing I can remember now is I began to feel all warm inside, and everything immediately went into slow motion. It felt like I was going down into something, and I had this warm feeling. What happened really was the boat had disintegrated. A hydraulic explosion, not an ignition one where there's fire. Water had gotten into the boat, somehow tore it to a million pieces. And of course, I was one of the million pieces that's floating down the river. Slovak was terribly upset and frightened and concerned. Right behind me, he tried to go on, turn around, come back, and tried to grab me.
And I swam to a piece of wood where it looked like a chair, but Billy wasn't there. So a few minutes later, I found him, and I helped the Coast Guard guys to put him on a boat. They took him to the hospital.
I wasn't completely aware of everything, but I did hear Joe Lewis, a fellow that was on our crew at the time, say to the doctor, well, is he going to live? And the end result was I had to be flown back to Seattle to get immediate care as quickly as possible. Slovak, of course, was a professional flyer. I had done a lot of flying with Myra.
And they had a special pilot for him, but he refused to fly anybody else but me. So we landed in Chicago O'Hara, and then they asked us to taxi close to the Star Cruiser.
Because I remember this, that it was a very long, long flight, and Myra virtually had to carry me to Seattle.
I remember when we were coming to a thunderstorm, it was very rough air, and I was holding Billy with my body.
I forget that, and I'll never stop thanking him for it, because he did carry me there. Soon after arriving at the hospital, we were able to find out that, as a result of diagnosis, that maybe I was banged up a little more than we really originally thought, to a point where I guess the extent involved ruptured kidneys, and I think we tore the stomach loose away from the abdominal wall. As I mentioned, the superficial wounds and cutting my tongue in half and things like that. And it was a long time as far as healing was concerned. It just took a long time. I think that mentally, I began to have second thoughts. Maybe I realized, too, that, or at least I found out later, you have to be a lot stronger than that. You can't have something like that just conclude a career. The press began, I think. I can't blame everything on media. It's not fair. You have a way of controlling media by the way you respond to questions and answers, but the truth was, they were suggesting that maybe I really would never again be up to the competitive level I once had been that helped me do a little winning, because of serious injuries.
I was lucky enough to get a piece of film of that accident, and I gave it to Bill, and after Bill saw the accident and everything else, I think he kind of talked himself back into it and got back into racing again. We were all happy he did. There was a little doubt in his mind, our minds, but after he once got back into it, he just forgot all about it and went out and raced as hard as ever.
We took the brand new boat, a brand way, a second in a series of 3. We took it on the Detroit Memorial with it and went right back for the Gold Cup in Seattle, Washington. I was moving down the front straightaway in the #1 lane at about 165 miles an hour. The boat wouldn't turn. The balance of the field was getting ready to turn, and I knew I wasn't, and I really was in deep trouble. I raised a wave to them to back off, and they all were pros. They all backed off their by, and outside the perimeter of the race course was a 40-foot steel Coast Guard boat. Man, I came in and just zapped him just forward of the midships at about 100 miles an hour. I had been thrown out of the boat, and I don't remember really everything that happened to me because I was unconscious before I left the cockpit.
Incredibly, no one was killed, although this Coast Guardsman just managed to climb from the wreckage at the last moment. The boat was rapidly sinking. and divers continued to search for Bill Muncey. They feared that his body had been trapped in the wreckage below, and there was no doubt in anyone's mind that it was a body they were looking for.
Scene. Here you see a scuba diver going down.
Luckily, a Coast Guard helicopter arrived and spotted him hundreds of feet away from the crash. In minutes, the Coast Guard vessel and the brand new Miss Thriftway slid to the bottom of Lake Washington, and Bill was being lifted from the water.
I was rescued by a Coast Guard helicopter, and one of the fellows aboard tried to find out if I was unconscious, floating again, which was very important, but he'd find my pulse, and even in the best of circumstances, it's difficult to measure a pulse, and he couldn't find the pulse, and so he suggested that, or at least he told the commander of the copter that I would be DOA, dead on arrival.
Once the helicopter was down, the medics determined that Bill was still alive. He was unconscious, and nobody knew how badly he was hurt, but everybody did know that it was a miracle he wasn't on the bottom of Lake Washington. Friends and strangers carried him to a waiting ambulance, and the nightmare began all over again. One in the hospital, and again the nagging question, would he ever drive again?
I'm not ready to quit yet, and I would like to continue racing a little longer.
Physically, Bill would recover, but he had another major problem to overcome: self-doubt. We'll continue his story in a moment.